So, continuing chapter 4 and the Attorney General's memorandum. Let's see. Housing providers must reasonably accommodate tenants with disabilities, unless doing so would be an undue burden on their operation. For example, if a tenant shows they have a disability and that keeping and emotional support animals necessary to afford them equal opportunity to use and enjoy the dwelling, the housing provider has to permit the emotional support animal, even if they have a no pets policy. Um, a no pet rule cannot be enforced against a person with a disability for having a service animal, those that perform tasks. A landlord may also not charge tenant with a disability an extra fee for keeping a service or guide dog or guide animal. Landlords have to permit a tenant with a disability at their own expense to make reasonable modifications to the premises if those modifications are needed for the tenant to fully enjoy the premises. Now, does a tenant need to put the property back the way that it was when they moved in? Like if they need a wider doorway for a wheelchair, do they got to put the narrower door back in when they leave? Or remove the wheelchair ramps that they may have installed?
That's if someone with a disability is coming.
Yeah, if you have somebody with a disability and they make these modifications to the house that they're renting, do they have to put it back the way that it was when they moved in?
Like if they're moving out,
Yeah.
I would assume so.
Okay. It, I would say it depends. It depends on what that modification is and if it would cause a future tenant um, to not be able to fully enjoy the premises. Like the wheelchair ramps, yeah, that should be removed. But a wider door, future tenants may like that better. It's easier to move their furniture in and out, right? So it really depends. But what do we need to know for exam here is that the landlord has to allow the tenant with a disability to make modifications at their own expense, not the landlord's expense, so that they can enjoy the premises. All right. Now, the LAD prohibits discrimination based on familial status. So, discrimination against families with children under the age of 18 and pregnant people, pregnant women, not pregnant people. You see, they're starting to change the language already here. Pregnant people. Landlords similarly cannot use unreasonable occupancy restrictions to prevent families with children from moving in. What's the only exception to that? Senior housing.
55 and older,
Yeah, that
62 and older.
Yep, housing for older persons. That's senior housing and 55 plus communities, correct. Selectively inquiring about or requesting information about documentation of the buyer or tenant's immigration status. Well, because New Jersey, first of all, is a sanctuary state now, even though that's not really illegal, really a real thing. Um, it's just that nobody's been enforcing against it yet, you know. So you can't have a state that creates their own laws that are in violation of federal law, direct contradicting the federal law. Um, so New Jersey is one of those states that we passed all these sanctuary status laws, but that stuff will never hold up if anybody actually wants to challenge it. But as a landlord, you can't, or a seller, you can't be requesting somebody's citizenship status because of their actual or perceived national origin, race, ethnicity, or otherwise discrimination on a basis of a violation of the LAD. Yeah, because first of all, we're a melting pot. We get people from all over the world here. How are you going to say just by the way somebody looks if they're a citizen or not, or if they're legally here in the United States or not? You can't do that. That would be discriminatory in itself. Um, Now, as explained in the okay, once again, I love how whenever they talk about this, they first has to justify it by talking about their credentials, by standing at a from a position of authority. As explained in the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development's April 26 guidance document, you know, that HUD document where they get a head count of people in prison and then they segregated them by their races. Because of widespread racial and ethnic disparities in the criminal justice system, blanket policies that make all individuals with any prior arrests or criminal convictions ineligible to rent violate both the LAD and the Federal Fair Housing Act because they have a disparate impact. Disparate impact. What about individual accountability based on their race and national origin, and are not supported by legitimate business necessity? It's always boiling back down to race for some reason. These people that are making these laws, they love to make laws and separate us by class. And housing providers may not use a criminal history as a pretext for intentionally discriminating based on race. Well, yeah, of course, with that. If you're going to do a criminal background check on anybody, you do it across the board on everybody. You don't do it. You don't do a criminal background check on a person of color and not a white person. That's straight up racist. That's the definition of it. You know, the spam calls start. Junk calls start today constantly. All right. I don't even know why I have a house phone anymore. They're all garbage calls that come in. All right. So what are the penalties if you commit discriminatory housing act against the LAD? 10, 25, 50, right? 10, 25, 50. 10,000 for a first violation, 25 for a second, 50 for 2 or more violations within 7 years. Victims of discrimination can recover economic damages related to discrimination, such as if they had to pay for a higher rent elsewhere because a landlord refused to rent to somebody for discriminatory reasons, as well as damages for emotional distress, pain, and humiliation. In more egregious cases, victims may also recover punitive damages. Now, the broker or salesperson with whom you list your property must transmit to you every written offer they receive on your property. How soon?
24.
Yep, within 24 hours. And brokers and salespeople are licensed by the Real Estate Commission, and their activities are subject to the LAD, as well as the general real estate laws of the state. What are the general real estate laws of the state referred to as? Title
45, 50.
Title
What was
8.
it? Go ahead, say it. 45. No, it was 45,
45, 15.
15. And Commission's own rules and regulations, which we call the Administrative Code or Title
11.5.
11.5. Correct. Title 11, Chapter 5. So the broker or salesperson must refuse your listing if you indicate an intent to discriminate on any basis prohibited by the law against discrimination, the LAD. Now, these are the exemptions. The sale and rental of property, including open land, whether for business or residential purposes, is covered by the LAD. And it's subject to the following exemptions. Note that when the LAD exemptions apply, there could be other laws in place, other civil rights laws that nonetheless prohibit the discrimination. Like when the Federal Fair Housing Act has exceptions to it, but you always fall back on the Civil Rights Act of 1866 when it comes to race or color, right? Now, the LAD does not apply to the rental of a one unit in a two-family dwelling if the owner occupies the other unit, or to the rental of room or rooms in a one-family owner-occupied dwelling. That's basically a rooming house then. A religious organization can give preference to persons of the same religion when selling or renting real property. And in certain types of housing designated for older persons, it's not unlawful to discriminate based on familial status if they post that they adhere and it's meant to be housing for older persons. All right, let's get into this fair chance in housing nonsense again. Yes, I say it's nonsense. I don't care if it's a law. I think it's stupid law written by stupid politicians that have some kind of dopey agenda, and I can't figure out what it is. So the Fair Chance in Housing Act prohibits housing providers from asking about rental applicants' criminal records on an initial application, otherwise considering an applicant's criminal record in any way until after they made a conditional offer to the applicant, basically to rent. They basically got to first make you an offer to rent and then say, hey, now it's conditional on a background check, with limited exceptions as required under the federal law. The goal of the FCHA is to ensure that formerly incarcerated and system-involved people have fair access to housing around the state. Wow, didn't they lighten the language up on that? So, ex-cons. Now, nothing about the FCHA requires landlords or housing providers to consider a person's criminal records in housing. And if a housing provider does review an applicant's criminal history after a conditional offer, specific restrictions do apply. A housing provider must conduct an individualized analysis of the applicant's criminal record and may only deny housing with certain housing if withdrawing a conditional offer is necessary to fulfill a substantial, legitimate, and non-discriminatory interest. Yeah, how about like the safety of me and my family and maybe the other tenants because you've got a criminal record because you're a hardcore criminal? How about that? Is that not enough? Apparently it's not. So here are some specific requirements for housing providers under the FCHA. Housing providers are prohibited from asking about an applicant's criminal record until after you first made them a conditional offer that you're going to rent to them, except for convictions of drug-related, check this out, except for convictions for drug-related criminal activity for the manufacture or production of methamphetamine on the premises of a federally assisted housing. However, if they had that meth lab in your mom's house, you can't use that as or somebody's mother's house. Let's forget about saying it's your mom's house. On somebody's mother's house, then you can't use that against them. It's only if they had the meth lab in a federally assisted housing. How does that make sense? They're carving out exceptions. The government's saying, hey, listen, you need to follow these rules. You cannot use a person's criminal history against them, but we can. It's basically what they're saying here. Or if the applicant is subject to a lifetime registration in a state sex offender registry. Now, even after a conditional offer, a housing provider may not consider arrests or charges that did not result in criminal convictions. Of course, if you're innocent, or if this happened when you were a minor, or if the case was expunged or dismissed or whatever, of course you cannot use that against somebody. Okay, so that's all that this next paragraph says. Now, if a housing provider chooses to consider an applicant's criminal history, this is the only time that you can use it against them and decide not to rent to them. Okay, check out the guidance that they give. It's clear as mud, unless you have a law degree. Convictions for murder, aggravated sexual assault, kidnapping, arson, human trafficking, sexual assault, endangering the welfare of a child in violation of this code, and convictions for any crime that requires lifetime state sex offender registration. Now, hold on one second. All that stuff they just quoted are the only reasons that you can decide not to rent to somebody. But there's an addition to that. If it was a first-degree indictable offense or release from prison for that offense within the past 6 years, or if it was a second or third-degree indictable offense or release for prison for that offense within the past 4 years. By the way, do you guys know the difference between first, second, third, or fourth-degree crime? I don't. Short of having a law degree and maybe the law's in front of you to do some research, how the hell do you know who would qualify not that I could deny renting to, So most landlords are not going to be able to figure this out. And I think that's the point. Any fourth-degree indictable offense or release from prison for that offense within the past 1 year. Okay, so You can only decide not to rent to these people and that committed these kinds of crimes, but only if they had these certain offenses and they were convicted for them or released from prison within these certain time frames. Now, for convictions that can be considered, a housing provider has to document. They must conduct an individualized analysis. So you need to document your decision so they could come back and use it against you and sue you later. They're acting like it's some kind of a guidance that helps you out as a landlord or property manager. And it does nothing of the sort. You have
I
to
have a question.
yeah,
Sorry
yeah,
to cut you off. Have you ever been in this type of situation?
not yet.
Okay, because
Not
I
yet.
wanted to know how you navigated through
Because
it.
yeah, because I mean the last time I really had to deal with I dealt with renters that we did criminal background checks on that had uh, that we had to deal with. This law was not in place yet. So yeah, it's I don't know. I don't know. Yeah,
Okay.
short of getting an attorney to give you the guidance on this, I don't know who's going to be hiring an attorney for this. So most likely people are just going to be renting to
Mm,
whoever. And I think
okay.
that's the point of this law altogether is so that you don't deny ex-convicts, or I'm sorry, they softened the language, system involved people.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah, isn't it? So the nature and so you have to document the nature and severity of the offense, the applicant's age at the time the offense occurred. I guess you got to do a bit of research here too. How recently the offense has occurred, any information the applicant provided in their favor since the offense. Yeah, I ain't do it. If the offense happened again or in the future, whether that would impact the safety of the other tenants on the property, and whether the offense happened on or was connected to property that the applicant had rented or leased. In other words, the person committed the offense already in your house and you used to rent to them, and now they're coming back to you once they got out of prison and they want to rent from you again. Huh. So there you go. Clear as mud, right? Can you guys figure out who you don't have to rent to? These are their these are their specific guidelines that help you out though. Or do they? Now check this out. If we continue on in this form, it says if the housing provider intends to consider your criminal history as provided under FCHA after the conditional offer, they cannot accept an application fee before disclosing the fact to the applicant and offering the applicant an opportunity to provide evidence of inaccuracies in their criminal record, other evidence of rehabilitation or mitigating factors. And this requirement can be fulfilled using the model disclosure statement. Oh my God, it looks like they put together a guide for us that'll make this a lot easier to figure out. You know where this link takes you? I typed it in. I took the time to type it in. It opens up a PDF document, and this model, a disclosure statement that helps you decide who you could rent to or not rent to, it takes you back to this information up top that we just went over. That was clear as mud. Now, if the housing provider withdraws the conditional offer based on the criminal record, they must explain in writing their justification for doing so, which can be fulfilled using the model notice here. And you know where that takes you? Back to the previous slide again, to the bottom part where you're taking notes of this. That's all it is. So it's not exactly like it makes it clear and easy on who you can deny renting to. Okay. Now, this is an important thing for landlords, for property owners, That's why it makes it to the point that who the heck wants to be a residential landlord anymore? You know, it's not just this stuff about, being able to do criminal background record checks on people. Um, being a landlord, uh, the law favors tenants in New Jersey. New Jersey's a tenant rights state. They favor the tenants more than landlords instead of just looking at it on an equal basis, because they look at it when we're talking about like lease violations and things of that nature. New Jersey tends to be a tenant rights state, like California. They care more about the rights of the tenant because they look at the courts look at the tenant like they're ignorant, don't know anything about the law, and the landlord is a savvy business person, so they should therefore have better knowledge about these things. Okay, which is kind of crazy because you get a lot of people. Hey, I'm going to buy a two-family house and I'm going to rent out the other unit. They're going to help pay my mortgage, and that's the approach people don't go into this. Buying multifamily houses like, yeah, I'm going to be a big-time landlord business person now. All sophisticated, but that's the way the courts look at you. Okay. All right, so if the housing provider utilizes an outside vendor because you can't make heads or tails over doing the background checks of people, so hey, why don't you just hire an outside vendor to do those criminal background checks for you and sift out the parties that you don't wanted to rent to, right? Well, if you're hiring an outside vendor to do this, to conduct a criminal record check on your behalf because you can't make heads or tails of it, they shall take all reasonable steps to ensure the vendor or outside person or entity is conducting the criminal record check consistent with the requirements of the FCHA. Now, how would you do that? Because you can't make heads or tails of this, and that's the whole point of why you hired that outside vendor. So the housing provider will be liable under the FCHA for relying on a criminal history inquiry conducted by a vendor or outside person or entity that's conducted in violation of the FCHA if it failed to take reasonable steps to ensure compliance. So you hire an outside tenant screening company to do the tenant screening for you because you can't make heads or tails of it, and they'll still hold you liable if they screw up this process. Now, housing providers are prohibited from discriminating against those with criminal records. Oh, they finally said it. The law protects criminals or ex-cons, ex-criminals. Okay. Look, when people go to prison, they serve their time, they get out. I understand that, but the whole fact that you committed these crimes to begin with, there should be some kind of consequence to it. Sure, you served your time in prison, but that doesn't mean that everybody needs to accept you now because you sat in prison and maybe even learned some new tricks when you were in the slammer there. That's why we used to take away the rights of the voting rights for criminals of certain high crimes, when they commit felony acts. You guys know that ex-convicts that done felonies, that they lose their voting rights. You guys were aware of that? Were you guys also aware that ex-convicts, when they get out and they serve their time, they could reapply to get their voting rights back?
No.
Yeah. Our politicians passed a law in New Jersey that allows that. So what's the consequence of committing crimes? Maybe go to jail, get a light sentence for good behavior, you get out, you get all your voting rights back, landlords can't hold it against you. No wonder why people are committing crimes over and over again. All right, so they also can't require applicants to submit to drug or alcohol testing or to provide information from treatment facilities. Because remember, under federal law, people in drug treatment programs are considered a protected class. So apparently all you can do is ask them if they are a current drug abuser or if they're in treatment. And they could say they're in treatment, and then you have to go by it. Okay. Now, if you violate the FCHA, you may be subject to $1,000 fine for a first violation, up to $5,000 for a second, and $10,000 for 2 or more violations within 7 years. Now, if you got questions about this, because it's confusing, you could call the New Jersey Civil Rights. You could go to njcivilrights.gov or call their hotline number here. But I probably would not do that because they're not there to protect you as the landlord. They're there to protect the criminals. They're the ones that made these laws, that pushed for it. I've gone to so many of these training sessions from NewJerseyCivilRights.gov, and I'm on their email dispatch. I subscribe to it. I get emails constantly for new programs that they're putting in place, trying to find new protected classes that they could add in. And some of them are just ridiculous, as you could see with this one. And then now, in the past, nobody had to sign this document. You just need to give the Attorney General's memorandum wait, who do you give it to? Well, it already says it here, property owner. So you give it to the property owner at the time you get a listing. And then the real estate agent needs to sign it as well now. All right, so landlords can't refuse to rent a one-bedroom apartment to two members of the same sex if the apartment would be available to members of the opposite sex. Yeah, that's sexual harassment based on their sexual orientation, right? It's also legal to subject a tenant to sexual harassment. Lease may not provide. This is under New Jersey law stuff, okay, which is the same as pretty much the federal law. A lease may not provide that it will become null and void on the birth of a child. I dealt with a guy one time. He didn't want to rent to a tenant that I was showing the apartment to because she was pregnant. She was clearly pregnant. She looked like she was going to be due any day now. But we had to meet. They were my clients. You know, there was a husband and wife, and they had two little children, and they were looking at a two-bedroom condo. We had to meet the landlord there to let us in, and I let them go in first, and then I start walking in, and then the landlord grabs me by the arm, and he says, "I'm not renting to them." He's like, "She's going to pop any day now." His exact words. He said, "She's going to pop any day now." I never heard anybody talk like that. And so I was like, I shushed him and I pushed him off into the other room. I'm like, "What are you talking about?" And he's like, "I'm not going to get in trouble for renting to too many people. You already got 4 of them over there, and then she's pregnant. She's clearly going to pop any day now and have that baby. I'm not going to get in trouble for renting to too many people." I was like, "How would you do that?" And he's like, "Well, Roselle Park has an ordinance that you could only have 2 occupants per bedroom, and there's already 4 of them." I was like, "Whoa, whoa, whoa, whoa. First of all, that baby's not here yet. And second of all, when that baby is delivered, it's not considered an occupant until they reach 2 years of age." And he's like, "Yeah, you're going to say anything you want. You just want to get a commission." See, this was the problem with the old version of the Attorney General's memorandum, where they did not cite examples that commonly come up. Now, this is one of those issues that they bring up. You cannot discriminate against pregnant people. Okay. Well, she was pregnant, so you can't discriminate against her just because she's pregnant. And, I told him that. I had a little bit of an argument with him there, and I told him, "Listen, if you continue with this line of whatever it is that you're doing here," I said, "they're going to hit you with a lawsuit so fast it's going to make your head spin, a discrimination lawsuit so fast it's going to make your head spin. Before you say another word about it, I don't even want to hear it from you. Before you say another word about this, I suggest you talk to your own attorney, because if they want to rent here and you deny them rental for this, especially after saying that to me, you're going to get sued." And my clients did want to rent it. So he checked with his attorney, and his attorney confirmed what I said. They said, first of all, that child's not here yet. It's not born yet, right? And then when the child is born, an infant is not considered an occupant until they reach 24 months of age. So I was right in what I told them. And but the words that came out of his mouth really shocked me. How he said that. Uh, I understand his concern, I guess, because the municipality may fine for renting to too many people, but I don't think that was his issue. Because of a child being born. I mean, use a little common sense. Anyway, a facility that does not admit pets must permit a guide or service animal, and people with AIDS are considered having a disability under New Jersey laws and entitled to protection against discrimination in housing, just like with the federal law. The LAD protections continue to apply even if the conduct at issue is related to COVID-19. Yeah, it's any illness. For example, a landlord cannot seek to evict a tenant because the tenant has or the landlord believes the tenant to have COVID-19. Yeah, of course, you can't evict a tenant because they're sick or they have any kind of illness. Likewise, a landlord cannot refuse to rent to someone who's Asian because they believe Asian people are responsible for spreading COVID-19. Okay, this sounds like some of that Trump derangement syndrome stuff right there. No, duh. Even though we do know for a fact that COVID-19 was created in a lab in Wuhan, China, we have facts for that now. Of course, it's not all Asian people's faults. That would be stupid to think that way. This sounds like it's the media trying to project a message here with that TDS, their Trump derangement syndrome there. So that whole statement is kind of stupid to begin with. But yeah, if a landlord was that stupid and did have that type of line of thinking, yeah, that is discrimination. You can't discriminate against Asian people because you think all Asian people are responsible for COVID. Everybody, who here did not have COVID yet? Anybody here not have COVID? Really? You sure? Sometimes it could be mild too. But I think I had it 3 times. I think I actually had it before it was even officially announced in the United States of being here. Because I had it was like the worst flu I've ever had in my life. It knocked me out for a month, an entire month. I was out on my butt. I never felt anything so bad before in my life. And I think I had one of the first strains of it, which was bad. Landlords are allowed to enforce health regulations limiting the number of persons allowed for the size of any given apartment. And it is, of course, always proper to accept or reject prospective tenants on the basis of their ability to pay rent, their income, and their likelihood to do so, their credit rating. So you could verify their income, you could verify their employment, you could check their credit. Just can't do criminal background checks, really. And then if you do, you got to rent to most of them anyway. Now, an interesting thing they came up here, and they said that you can't rent a 1-bedroom apartment to 2 members of the same sex. Okay. Did you guys know that this is dealing with adults, but did you guys know that at one point in time, if you had a family, with children, that you were going to rent to, if you had 2 children of the opposite sex, they could not share the same bedroom. It's the kind of warped thinking they have here, our politicians, the sick thinking that they may end up in some sort of a incestuous relationship, which is why they denied that. Which now that's no longer part of the law in New Jersey because that discriminates against poor people who can't afford a bigger place that has an extra bedroom for both of their children that are opposite sex. Right? But at one point in time, they had this as the law in New Jersey. But go figure, New Jersey makes up laws like that, but yet they have some really crazy, wacky laws on the books. Did you know New Jersey is one of the few states that allow a parent to marry their child You heard me right. I'm talking about like blood relatives, not like even adopted children or anything like that. It's disgusting.
Like the real
Your real,
biological dad.
your biological parent. Yep. Check this out. I think it was 2020. You know that program 2020? It's like 60 Minutes or 2020. It was one of those. Look it up. There was this couple that moved to New Jersey specifically so that they could get married. And it was actually the biological father to the daughter because the state that they were living in would not allow their relationship to flow or bud or bloom or whatever, however they worded it. It was disgusting. Um, yeah. So they moved to New Jersey so that they could get married.
That's crazy.
Tell me our politicians here aren't sick. All right. Yeah, this is our legislature here in New Jersey. These are the kinds of things they think up. Okay, I don't even want to go into it any more than that. All right, let's move on. Apartment buildings with 25 units or more, they actually have to report annually to the state the racial composition of their tenants and the methods used to advertise and handle rental inquiries. The purpose is to monitor possible discrimination if no minorities live there. I wonder how they do that. Do they just look at people and try to guess their race? Or anybody here a renter in an apartment building with 25 units or more? Anybody? No?
I am.
You are?
Yeah.
Has your landlord asked you what your race is?
Um, Honestly, yeah, on the application.
Well, I mean, since then, because every year, well, I guess they don't have to. I guess if they got it on the initial application, your race isn't going to change. Yeah. uh, that's interesting. Okay. Yeah, I don't remember that. When I was a superintendent of an apartment building that had it had about 25, 26 units. I don't recall us having that on our application. Anyway, so that's curious.
I had a quick question.
And what if you're biracial? You know, how does that work? Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
A friend of mine had she had bought a house and she rented it out. The one of the person in the house was sick, and at that time, I think it was 1998 or something, she couldn't charge him rent,
Mhm.
but then she couldn't afford to pay for the house, but then she couldn't even sell the house. Is that still in effect?
Wait, why wasn't she able to?
Because he was sick, he was disabled. So
So,
they
so
because
why
he
would
couldn't
he?
pay the rent. So he was sick, he had cancer. So
They're saying they couldn't evict him.
they couldn't evict him because he was supposedly sick and she couldn't sell the house or get new tenants, but she couldn't afford it anyway. I didn't ask her what she ended up doing with the house, but this was the case back then. I think it
Well,
was early 2000s, maybe.
if
Yeah.
somebody cannot afford the rent, if somebody can't afford the rent and or they're disabled, um, this could have the courts could allow them a longer time to relocate. But telling you that you cannot evict them ever and you need to pay the burden, you need to bear the burden of the costs perpetually until you eventually get foreclosed on because you can't afford it anymore. Um, no, but that's not the way it should be. Okay, but should be, and what judges do, judges make wacky decisions in New Jersey. So it, I wouldn't say no, absolutely to that. I know that New Jersey, for a long time, we have a shortage of judges, and they started taking judges out of retirement. And some of them had Alzheimer's and dementia, and they're sitting up on the bench. I know this because I got sued once and I was totally unaware of it because I was never served documents. Never served documents. And therefore, I didn't go to court. See, I would have because I have an attorney on retainer. So it's not a big deal. I just give the paperwork to the attorney, let them handle it. But I never got any kind of notification whatsoever until I got a default judgment against me and they took money out of my bank account. And I was like, whoa, what the hell is this? They took a lot of money out of my bank account. So I went to my attorney immediately, and my attorney was he was like, yeah, you had a judgment against you here because you didn't show up in court. You know, he did a little research, found out. And I was like, I would have just given it to you. I was like, I never got a notification on this, you know. So he went, contacted the courts, tried to mediate this, that we needed to get to try to rehear it all, you know, because I was never served. Even though you guys know what the rule is to sue somebody, do they need to be served with documents? If you're suing somebody, do you need to serve them with papers like, hey, I'm suing you, you got to show up in court?
Yes.
How do you need to serve them?
Um, you have to go through those people that they be like you've been served. What are they called again?
Process servers or sheriff's department? Did you know that a person can just send it in the mail and then attest to the court, I swear I sent it to them, Your Honor? That's actually what happened here, and the person never sent it because I never got anything. I didn't even know who the hell the person was. I had no business relationship with them whatsoever. They filed court papers, or they said that they mailed them, but they never did. That's why I didn't show up. They got a default judgment against me, and then they used the sheriff's department as their enforcer to go pull money out of my bank account for the judgment. Now it's a matter of me trying to fight back and get the money back from them. And now I'm negotiating with the courts on how much money that they're going to give back, because they're only going to give a portion of it back because I had a judgment against me. And now we're trying to see which money they're going to give back. And I was like, well, first of all, the money in the escrow account that was clearly labeled escrow, because none of that money is mine. And then the judge kept screwing up the amount. He's like, okay, well, we'll award this amount back to you from the escrow. And then on the actual court papers, he awarded that much more money to the other person. Like he couldn't even get the characters straight. He couldn't remember who is who. That's how bad the court is with a judge that has dementia. You know, so I mean, over the years we've had some of the judges, you know, put back in, appointed in, new judges, you know, they get appointed. And well, we had a bunch of judges appointed over the years from the last couple presidents that we had. They were appointing judges left and right. So we have a lot more judges now. I don't know if we filled the missing quota that we needed, but we got more judges now. But those judges out of retirement were a nightmare. So that's something. Anyway, why do we even get into that conversation? I don't even know how the hell we got there. Okay. Yeah. So with this, you know, keeping track of the racial composition of the tenants, yeah, I never had to deal with that. I never had to deal with that before. I don't know. Maybe the landlord themselves directly did it, sent out something in the mail, but usually they'd have me give papers to the tenants. I don't know what that's about. All right. The love letters, we already went over this one. Do I need to play that one again, or did everybody see this? The buyer's love letters. It could be discriminatory. That's the when you're making an offer on a property, you try to get the buyer to handwrite a letter to the owner of the property to try to get your offer accepted by playing on their emotions. You know that, oh yes, we're the family that had the little child that we were talking in the kitchen that day when we came to see the house and we saw you. Well, right off the bat, they're saying that they had a child, so now it's familial status. You know that it could be discrimination thing if your offer is accepted or not accepted. So it's really suggested that you do not have your clients filling out these love letters to be sent to along with offers to the owners of property. And as a listing agent, you should really have a conversation with your seller there that they do not entertain any love letters. What the hell? I'll play it one more time for you.
Hi, I'm Charlie Lee, Senior Counsel and Director of Legal Affairs at NAR. As buyers compete in a hot real estate market, they are searching for ways to stand out from the crowd. One method being used is to send a love letter to entice the seller into choosing their offer. While a love letter may seem innocent, they can raise fair housing concerns and risk exposing both the real estate broker and their clients to legal risks. The Fair Housing Act makes discrimination illegal in the sale or rental of housing and prohibits making housing otherwise unavailable because of race, color, national origin, religion, sex, disability, or familial status. Many states and local governments have their own fair housing laws, which can include additional protected categories. The use of a love letter often presents fair housing issues because they often contain personal information about the buyer, such as their race and culture or traditions, as a way of appealing to the seller's emotions. Some buyers even go as far as sending sophisticated packages that include photographs and videos. For example, a buyer might send a letter with a photo of their family around a Christmas tree. As a result, the buyer has revealed their religion, which is a prohibited basis for a seller to base their decision to reject an offer. While it may not be the buyer's intent for the seller to use this information to discriminate, that is essentially the position that a love letter can place the seller. When considering that the information cannot be easily forgotten or unseen, a love letter may ironically cause the seller to be fearful of selecting the buyer's offer because of potential discrimination issues. Therefore, real estate professionals should advise their clients about the risk of love letters and, at a minimum, stress the importance of avoiding including any information in the letter that could be used to legally discriminate. But of course, even a photograph of the buyers could lead a seller to give preference to a buyer or reject them based on race or other background. Fair housing is a high priority throughout the country, and states are closely monitoring the practice of love letters. In fact, just recently, Oregon enacted a law to take effect on January 1, 2022 that bans the use of buyer love letters. Here are some best practices to consider when it comes to love letters. At the outset of the relationship, speak to your client about the risks of buyer love letters and the potential fair housing issues they raise. Remind your seller client that an offer should be assessed based only on objective criteria, such as price and timing. If your seller client insists they want to receive buyer love letters, advise them to consult legal counsel and to document their decision-making process in selecting an offer. Avoid helping buyer clients to draft or deliver love letters. Be sure to warn them against revealing any personal information that could raise fair housing issues. Counsel them to focus on the characteristics of the home or other objective information. Lastly, help your buyer clients find other ways to differentiate themselves to win the property. Beyond offering more money, the buyer may consider offering more flexibility with the closing date, additional earnest money, or waiving other contingencies that may appeal to the seller. Thank you for watching this episode of Window to the Law.
All right. So just to remind you there, a little refresher about those love letters. Okay, so zoning discrimination. Let's talk about Mount Laurel 1 and 2. first of all, what are zoning laws? Zoning laws are laws that dictate what kind of structure can be built where and the purpose that it can be used for. Now, Mount Laurel is a municipality in New Jersey. New Jersey has a lot of history. We're the third state admitted to the Union, third state in the nation. And therefore, we have a lot of history. You guys remember from your history classes something called the Underground Railroad? Had to deal with a route for escaping slaves from the South up to the North where they could be free. Well, New Jersey was in Mount Laurel. That was one of the end routes to the Underground Railroad, where slaves, former slaves, they escaped to New Jersey, and then from there, some settled in New Jersey, and some went to other areas throughout the country. So Mount Laurel, New Jersey, has a lot of population of people that actually ended up settling there. And back then, there was no zoning laws. You built a house. People were building houses next to each other. And so there's this one area where there's a road where all it is a lot of small houses built right next to each other. Now, how do municipalities improve their services? Because the town of Mount Laurel, New Jersey, they wanted to improve their services. They wanted to improve the schools, the roads, their infrastructure, the police, the fire departments, all that. Where do they get the money for this? Taxes, property taxes, to be more specific. And the property taxes are based on the value of the property. So these are all small homes on small lots. There's nothing the municipality can do like to jack up taxes on these people because it's based on the value of the home. They're limited in how much they could jack it up anyway. So the town of Mount Laurel, New Jersey, came up with an idea. Any new construction that's going to happen in a town is going to require a larger lot size to build a house on. So larger lot size, people start building larger homes. They're a little bit further apart. Then their values are going to be up higher, right? So then they could charge more in taxes. All right, so Mount Laurel had a good idea there on how to collect more money for for building their infrastructure. They only implemented it. They only went about implementing it in a wrong way. Okay. I'm not going to say Mount Laurel is a racist town. I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt there and say that Mount Laurel, New Jersey, they had a good idea. They just poorly implemented it. Because they required a much larger lot size than they probably should have. They should have probably required a range of housing, lot sizes in the different areas of town. But instead, they required a large lot size. Now, I don't know what that large lot size is, so let's just think of a ridiculous number. Let's just say it's an acre. Okay, so Mount Laurel came up with an idea that they said that living in Mount Laurel, New Jersey, if you bought land and you wanted to build a house, you need to have at least an acre of land in this densely populated state that's small in size. So you need to have at least an acre of land to build a house on it. So after that came about Mount Laurel 1 lawsuit filed by the NAACP against Mount Laurel, the town of Mount Laurel. The claim was that their zoning law that required you to buy these much, much larger lots now before you could buy a house, before you could build a house, essentially is discriminating against poor people who can't afford to buy such a large lot in order to build a house. Okay, so Mount Laurel 1 court decision is a good court decision. It said that basically you're excluding low income and poor people from from their area there through a practice known as exclusionary zoning. You're excluding poor people from an area because you're requiring such a large lot size that they can't afford it. Okay, that's how they came up to that terminology, exclusionary zoning. Okay. And I know they say low income and moderate income. This has nothing to do with moderate income people. This has to do with low income, okay? But courts stated that all developing communities had to zone for their fair share of the region's need for low-income and moderate-income families. In 1975, the court ruled that the poor may not be excluded from residential areas. So they also can't have the smaller lot sizes in areas that are surrounded by commercial properties either. Now, Mount Laurel, one court decision, we could all agree that's a good court decision. Mount Laurel, even though their intent was, let's give them the benefit of the doubt and say their intent was to improve the infrastructure in the town. They had a good idea. They just poorly implemented it by requiring a much larger lot size. So Mount Laurel, one court decision is a good court decision. But later on in 1983, Mount Laurel 2 lawsuit came about, a second lawsuit from the NAACP against Mount Laurel that resulted in courts providing specific guidelines for all developing communities and said that all municipalities have an obligation to provide a range of housing. And this was accomplished by allowing a higher density development, meaning building homes closer together than normally allowed, and requiring a 20% set aside. So basically the municipality has to keep a tabs on, for every new homes built, 20% of them need to be for low income and affordable housing. Now, it didn't say when they needed to be built, or where they needed to be built. It just said that they needed to keep tabs on it. So for every 100 houses, you had to 20 of them 20 of them needed to be for low-income affordable housing. Now, so if I built a building that had 100 units, do I have to have 20% low-income or affordable housing in that building? No, I don't. The town needs to keep track that 20 units need to be built somewhere, sometime. And because they do it this way, a lot of them never get built. They just keep a running tab in this book somewhere that, okay, we got this many low-income and affordable housings that need to be built sometime, somewhere, based on all the new construction that happened. So this is why you're seeing builders right now in your towns. They're building high-rises and all this stuff, and they may not have a single affordable low-income or affordable housing unit in them. Your town is letting them get away with it. So they're just writing in a book. Okay, well, we're now deficient on 20 more units that we need to get built, and they're keeping that running tab. So once again, this second lawsuit, Mount Laurel court decision, the courts provided specific guidelines for all developing communities. Let's reevaluate that sentence for a second. The courts did not provide specific guidelines for developing communities. The courts required local communities to create their own specific guidelines on how they were going to accomplish this, reaching this goal to develop this low income and affordable housing. And because of that, more than 50% of the municipalities in New Jersey never did it. They never put together the rules. Think about it for a second. If a judge told you as an individual, hey, you needed to come up with a bunch of laws that restrict what you do, and if you don't abide by those laws, you're going to be penalized, would you create a bunch of laws against yourself? No, that's just stupid, right? But that's what the courts required of municipalities, to create their own guidelines on how they were going to accomplish these goals. That's why more than half of the municipalities in New Jersey never did it. So this was accomplished by allowing higher density developments, 20% set aside, zoning for mobile homes, and a requirement that communities must cooperate with efforts to obtain subsidies, that's a dirty word for money, from the state and federal governments to accomplish their goals there. And then they put together a panel of judges appointed by the Chief Justice to listen to hardship cases of people who experience hardships because municipalities' zoning laws don't allow them to accomplish these goals, or because they never created the guidelines. So basically, they didn't actually create any rules for this. They created some rules that the municipalities had to follow, but they didn't create the specific guidelines on how they were going to accomplish those goals. Now, if you as an individual, or if you're a builder and you get some property and you want to build something on it, you go to get those plans approved by the municipality. And the municipality says, no, you can't build that there. This area is not zoned for that. If you look into if that town created the specific guidelines that Mount Laurel court decision required, if they did not create them, you could sue the municipality in a lawsuit that's called, I wrote it here on the side, builder's remedy. You could sue them for builder's remedy. It basically gives you the green light. If you go to this, you file the suit and you win it, the panel of judges here that listen to these hardship cases, they tell you, you got the green light, you could go ahead with your project and ignore your local zoning laws and build whatever the hell you want. Now, the purpose of this was to make sure that low-income and affordable housing gets built. But in practice, it's a loophole that builders are using to ignore the local zoning laws to build whatever the hell they want, and they don't build any low-income or affordable housing there. You guys familiar with Cranford? You guys know where the train station is in Cranford?
Yeah.
You know, across the street from it, all of those blocks were single-family houses. There may have been one or two family, but it was all single-family houses. A builder bought up all those blocks of single-family houses and then went to the town and said, we want to build storefronts with condos above them. And the town said, you can't do that. This is zoned for single family. Well, the builder found out that there's no, that Cranford did not put these rules in place that the Mount Laurel 2 court decision required. So they sued the town of Cranford for builder's remedy, and they won. And the judges said, okay, well, you could ignore the town zoning laws and build whatever the heck you want. Now, the spirit of this law was for the intent to build low-income and affordable housing. But is there any low-income or affordable, if you're familiar with that, is there any low-income or affordable units in those buildings? They built the storefronts with those condos above it.
Definitely
Is there
not.
one single affordable unit there? No, those things are expensive. So these are just loopholes for builders then, isn't it? This law is not accomplishing its goal. So several years ago, when Governor Christie was still governor, when he started running for president, I don't think he should have done that, but anyway, when he was the governor still, and this was around the time where he tried running for president, he went to our legislature in New Jersey and he said, listen, guys, these Mount Laurel court decisions are full of loopholes, and we're not accomplishing our goals of actually getting the low-income and affordable housing built that we desperately need. So I suggest you guys just do away with these laws, write a new law from scratch without all the loopholes in it. And then do you guys recall what happened in New Jersey, and for that matter, in the national media for like the next 2 weeks after that? The headlines were, Governor Christie proposes racist legislation to do away with long-standing protections for poor people and minorities. That's the way they framed it. In the national media and in the state media, until eventually he put his hands up in the air. He said, I quit, I give up, forget it, I'll drop it. And then you never heard a word of it again. Why? Because his political detractors used it as a way to get at him. Okay, this is what our politics have become, so divisive that if you're a Republican or a Democrat, they're at each other's throat. There's no in between where we could compromise and have conversations with each other anymore. You know, so That's what happened. And then, so he dropped it like a hot potato. And now we still don't have any rules in place that are not full of loopholes for builders and developers. Why? I'm guessing maybe some of these politicians are in bed with the developers, or maybe they're even financially tied to them, that they want these loopholes in place because they benefit from them and they get rich from them. What other reason could it possibly be that they don't want to fix the problem of low income or affordable housing, unless they just want to always use it as a issue to run on when they try to get reelected? This is why politicians don't fix a lot of problems, because if they fix the problems, what are we going to run on next time I run for office? That problem was fixed. We need to have these problems around that we could say it's the other side that's preventing us from doing this, and they're against it and we're for it. And that's what our politics, modern politics, have become. So either way, we still stuck with the Mount Laurel court decisions, which are full of loopholes. So what do we need to know for exams? You need to know just this. Write down this definition, because there's no clear highlight, no clear one sentence, one liner for you to highlight here in the book. So write this somewhere over there. Exclusionary zoning is a discriminatory zoning practice outlawed by the Mount Laurel court decisions, which discriminated against low-income persons, the poor. And that's all you need to know for exams. See, I gave you a little bit more insight to it than that. The book doesn't really give you a full picture of what actually happened in Mount Laurel. But teaching these courses, I did my research so that I could give you a nice explanation so you have a not working knowledge of it. You do need to be familiar with the Mount Laurel doctrine. Now, they've been trying to, recently, there's been some activity about Mount Laurel decisions here, but it's nothing significant. It's the only thing that there's no changes to the law. It's just they're saying that 20% that you've been keeping tabs on, and now that list is this long that of low income and affordable housing that you need to build. Well, it needs to get built now. This is why you're seeing towns like in Cranberry trying to steal, using eminent domain, a family farm so that they could build the low-income housing on it. Instead of just taking one of the abandoned warehouses that are in the area and then tearing them down and putting up affordable housing. I guess they got their preferred builders and they want the prime spots. And it's not going to be total affordable housing and low-income housing. So they want a nice prime area where they can build it. And in my town, these Meridia high-rises are going up everywhere. Seems like on every other corner in Linden, they're building these Meridia high-rises.
Everywhere.
With not a single affordable housing unit in it. Their affordable housing unit is a $2,500 studio. That's not exactly affordable housing. So now the mayor wants to, he recently put out a statement that not a single district within this town is exempt from it. We're going to be changing some zoning laws to put up affordable housing. In other words, we're going to put up apartment buildings in suburban communities that are zoned for one-family houses. Okay, basically that's his threat to the other areas. Why is he going to do that? Well, because he's in bed with the builders. I'm sure he's getting kickbacks from them. Corrupt as hell, the mayor in my town, his whole family. And this is their solution. Now we're going to take away your property by eminent domain, and we're going to rezone it so that we could put up an apartment building in the middle of a residential one-family house area. Because the state is pushing for it. It's not my fault. It's the state's fault. They're pushing for it all of a sudden. Well, what about all those high-rises with the builders? You're still building another one right now on the Wood Avenue and Elizabeth Ave. Why don't you put a couple affordable housing units there? Right? There's no answer. Silence, crickets. Okay. But this is how the politicians are dealing with it. So you guys will see once you're in the real estate business, you'll see it. I mean, I see Matthews nodding his head and the whole time.
Yeah, I live in Linden, so I already know.
Oh, okay. All right. All right, let's see. So you guys got that definition down? All right. So, I put together a slide for it here, and I also gave a definition of that builder's remedy here on my own slide. So if you wanted to actually just snap a picture of this, because it also explains builder's remedy, because this is the current law. And, if these politicians are taking advantage of these things, if you ever have a situation where you want to put an addition on your house or you want to build something, maybe it's an investment property that you want to invest in, or maybe you got a client that's interested in it. Find out, use this. You could use this to your advantage too until they fix the problem. Hey, don't let them just get away with it. You could do it too. The law is supposed to be for affordable housing, but they're not using it for that purpose. So I guess you could get away with it too. So if you ever have a project you want to do and your town says, no, you can't do that because it's not zoned for you to be able to do that there, look up if your town has put those Mount Laurel plans in place on how they're going to address the affordable housing. And if they did not, sue your town under builder's remedy in front of that 3-panel of judges that was set up to listen to hardship cases. Okay. Builders are getting away with it all the time. Look, don't trust what I say. You can try Googling the words New Jersey builders remedy lawsuits. And you'll see, well, there's been a lot of activity lately about them saying, well, we need to build more. So you'll probably come through of the first couple of pages now are just going to be like news articles on that. But beyond that, you'll start seeing a bunch of lawsuits like the one in Cranford. There was one in Summit. They're all over the place. Interesting how the political spin of the news stories work, right? But okay, anybody else want to snap a picture? Take the picture. Otherwise, I'm going to be changing that. Oh, you know what I also got to do? I also got to throw out that morning poll. How about that? All right, we got a poll out there, so everybody can answer it. Trying to shout a little bit. Sorry. Got to get everybody's attention. Wakey, wakey, we got a poll out there. All right, time to answer that poll before I'm about to take it down. Got about 10 more seconds before I remove this poll. But you better answer it or it's coming down. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Poll's coming down. Oh, you missed it. All right. So, continuing on.
Wait, so what happens? It was me that missed it. My internet.
Oh my God, where were you? What happened?
Huh?
Oh my God, where were you? What happened?
My internet. I don't know.
Should have said something. You missed it. You're not getting credit. That's it. I'm kidding. Was it you?
It was me.
Okay. I'll make note of it.
Thank you.
You're welcome. All right. So we got the standards of conduct. So code for equal opportunity. We got standards of conduct for realtors, and affirmative that we take an affirmative pledge to offer equal housing to all. And HUD and NAR often have fair housing partnerships and training classes and get the word out stuff about fair housing through local community initiatives as well. All right. We know that HUD requires that equal housing poster be posted, as well as the state of New Jersey has their own equal housing poster. We should prominently display signs that state discriminations against public policy and company policy, as well as state and federal laws. We got to make proper responses when a client expresses discriminatory desires, and we'll go over what your response should be. We're going to learn that reverse discrimination, yeah, that's actual discrimination. It has it right in its name, discrimination. And advertising, we're going to go over what you can and can't say in advertising. All right. So let's first highlight on page 86 here that the complainant does not have to prove guilty knowledge or specific intent, only the fact that discrimination had occurred in order for you to be found guilty of discrimination. Okay. So how does a broker go about complying with the law and making that policy known? Well, we just spoke about it from the previous slide, posting those fair housing posters and maybe posting a notice that your company complies with fair housing laws and does not discriminate and offers equal housing for all. In addition, NAR suggests brokers' positions can be emphasized by having your company policy, maybe having all the agents sign off on it, that they are not going to be engaging in these illegal activities and discriminatory activities. Like, remember that video I showed you from that lady in, what was that, one of the Carolinas there that was discriminating in that condo building, trying to filter out who people that she'll allow to rent or buy in there based on their race. In there, that the company, when they were found guilty, even after she was dead, even though they put forth that policy and had all their agents sign another pledge affirming equal and non-discriminatory practices, and that their company is not going to tolerate it. Now, so what if you do if you got a client that expresses a discriminatory preference for housing? They say, hey, listen, I'm looking to buy a house or rent a house, but I don't want to be by these people or those people. How would you respond to that? I mean, they give a very robotic response here. It says, if somebody expresses a locational preference for housing based on race, the association's guidelines suggest that you give a response like this. To me, it sounds a little bit robotic. I would try to figure out a way to talk to people like human beings. Don't be shouting at anybody. Just talk to them like a normal person, and find a way that you could have a conversation that flows nice and easy. Okay, you don't say things like, this is their response, what they suggest that you say. I cannot give you that kind of advice. I will show you several homes that meet your specifications. You will have to decide which ones you want. Okay, that's very robotic. Okay, if they start telling me that, hey, I'm looking for a house, these are the criteria, but I don't want to be by these people or those people, I'm going to be like, listen, I don't want to hear none of this. That's against the law. I cannot search for homes based on discriminatory criteria. I could lose my license over it. I could get fined heavily over it. I ain't doing it. Your commission's not worth it. So I could search for homes based on the objective criteria, like your price range and the features and the architectural style. So if you have an idea where it is that you want to be, you could do your own discrimination in your own time. You just tell me which areas those are that you want me to look in, and I'll look in those areas. But don't ask me to search for homes based on who lives where. Okay? Get them in their place. You won't need to hear it again if you ever do come across that. Now,
I have a question. Do you encounter that?
I was just about to get into that. I was just about to say. I have a few times, but not many as you would think. I've been in the real estate business since 2004. Have I come across this a couple times? Yes, I have. Has it been that often? Rarely, very rarely. But I have come across it. But sometimes, like even with that one video where they showed that I showed you with that lady discriminated, they showed another realtor that was explaining that we need to we are constantly reminded about these fair housing issues and classes that we need to take. That sometimes people tell us, I'm not racist, but what's the composition of the whatever? Okay. Now, I usually don't have people, actually, I can't say I ever had anybody except for one guy ever ask me to search for homes based on who lives in an area. Okay. Um, and he was just like straight up racist, He's like, I don't want to live by these people. I don't want to live by those people. I don't want to live by these people. And I'm like, dude, you're not giving me much to work with here. We live in New Jersey. This is the melting pot, man. You tell me where that area is, and I'll look for a home for you there. But don't ask me to search for homes. I cannot search for homes based on who lives in an area. I could search for homes based on the architectural style, how many bedrooms, how many baths, in the areas that you want, in the price range you want. But I'm not going to be engaging in this conversation with you even. I don't want to get in trouble for this. I could lose my license for this, okay? So if you find an area that you want to look for a home in, that's fine, But I could search for homes for you and provide them to you, and then you need to decide. So I'll give you the addresses. You drive by, you tell me if you're interested in the homes or not. If not, then not. If yes, then I'll set up an appointment. Okay. But I'm not going to search for homes based on who lives in an area. It's hard enough for me to find this much house in this price range for you. Now you're going to throw in this loophole. First of all, it's illegal and I can't do it. I'm going to lose my license over it, and your commission is not worth it. Okay. So I had one guy ever like that, and he was actually a franchisee for a major. He was a franchisee for a major food restaurant. I'm not going to get into it further than that, because then you'll probably be able to figure out what restaurant it is. So I'm not going to get further into that. But yeah, that kind of blew my mind. But anyway, often when I do see discrimination, it is the weirdest thing. You would figure it'd be like a white guy against like blacks and Hispanics and all these other people. Actually, the most times that I have seen discrimination, it's people against their own race. Like, I've seen black people discriminate against other black people because they were blacker than them. I've seen, like Haitians. I've seen Haitians discriminate against other Haitians because of where they're from. Indians. I've seen a lot of Indians discriminating against other Indians based on the region they're from, or their dialect, or whatever it is. It's usually like people from within the same, what you would think is the same. They're Indians, Haitians are Haitians, but no, they're still discriminating against each other. It's the weirdest thing. You're going to learn about new types of discrimination that you didn't know that was a thing. Okay. So that's the kind of discrimination I mostly came across. Okay. It wasn't like people asking me outright, except for that one guy. Well, I also had an interesting one with a girl one time. It was one of my listings, and I'll never forget this. This was in Roselle. It was a beautiful property, but Roselle is way overtaxed. But this guy had a gorgeous house. He maintained this house. It was an older house, but he maintained it like it was brand new. It was a gorgeous house on a huge lot. Huge lot. His backyard was 300 feet deep in Roselle. It's a huge lot. So I meet the girl there at the property. She got there first, and she got to look at the backyard. And then I get there, and I'm going to the lock box, and she comes around, and she's like, introduces herself, and we start talking. I take her through the house. I show her the house. When we're done, we come out, and she loves it. Only if we could pick it up and put it in a different area where there were not so many black people. Now, keep in mind, the girl was black. So now I'm like leaning against, I'm standing there on the porch, and I'm leaning against the railing, and I'm kind of like looking at her, like eyeing her up, like, are you like punking me or something here? You know, it's like like all these things that are coming out of her mouth is like all these racist stereotypes you'd expect to come out of some redneck, you know. But yeah, I'm just I'm not saying a word. I'm just looking at her while she's talking, and I'm just like baffled that these words are coming out of her mouth. And I'm wondering now, is she a tester? We didn't get into what testers are until it's coming up in the next couple pages. Testers are these undercover mystery shoppers trained by HUD. They're there to test you to see if you're going to engage in discriminatory banter or they could be the same race as you or the opposite. They could be the same sex as you or the opposite. They could be the same sexual orientation or the opposite. They're there to test you, to push your buttons and see if you take the bait on on not treating everybody equally and fairly. Okay, they're not employed by HUD. They are volunteers that are trained by HUD, the Department of Housing and Urban Development, to see if you're going to engage in any kind of discriminatory banter. So I'm just like looking at her, and I'm on the porch, and I'm like, what do you say to somebody like this? She's like, yeah, when I came off the Parkway, I had to go through this neighborhood. They had all these fast food places here. And then I drove down this street. There was so many black people. That's all I seen was black people. And it's like, that's like everything that's coming out of her mouth. And I'm just like, okay, what do you say? I don't want to engage in that conversation. So I'm thinking that she's a tester. But it actually turns out she was a client. She eventually did buy a house from me. But it really blew my mind how the words were coming out of her mouth. The thing is, this young black girl recently lost both of her parents in a car accident, and she became the instant mother for her two younger twin sisters. And she could not afford to keep up the lifestyle that her parents had. They had good jobs. And they lived in an area where it was a diverse community, people from all different backgrounds. So she wanted that same kind of an area, but she didn't know how to express it without all those words coming out of her mouth. I guess she didn't realize how it was sounding coming out of her mouth, but it sounded like the most racist rants. But she ended up actually being a very nice girl. I even got invited to the housewarming party, but I thought she was a tester for sure, because sometimes you come across people like this and then they disappear, and phone doesn't work anymore. They could have been a tester, I don't know. Emails bounce, but she was a legit client. But yeah, you do come across sometimes. Here's another one I had in North Brunswick. I had this one condo. It was in a complex that the racial composition of the complex was probably majority Indian, maybe a little bit less than a quarter whites, and then the rest a different composition of backgrounds. So this was a beautiful condo. It was a corner unit. It was larger than most of them. It had an extra garage. It had a basement that was larger than most of the units there. That many didn't even have basements. So I got a lot of calls on it. The one problem with it, I was having a tough time trying to sell it to anybody that was Indian that came in there, because one of the things that most of the Indians people that came in, they were asking what direction the front door faces, and the front door was not facing east. Okay, east is like the best for people that this makes a difference to. If the direction that the front door faces, now you may not understand this or why they're doing it, but it has to deal with their religion or what their guru advised them, and also people who follow feng shui principles they follow the same sorts of things just for different reasons. Now. so the front door wasn't facing in the direction that was desirable for most of the people that came in. The property owner didn't understand that for the life of her. I was explaining it to her, and she didn't believe me. She's like, you've been doing so many open houses," and she's like blaming me, like, "How come I didn't get her a buyer yet?" I'm like, "What do you want me to do?" It's like, I've shown this property to so many hundreds of people already. I'm talking about hundreds of people I showed it to. And they're all like, "What direction does the front door face?" And she's like, "That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard in my life." And keep in mind, she's Indian. Okay. And she's like, "I never heard of such a thing. That's the dumbest thing." And I was like, "Well, it's mostly Indian people that are saying this." It's like, listen, you don't got to believe me. You could come in here. Sunday, I'll do another open house. You come in here shortly before the end of the open house, and I guarantee you're going to come across one person that said that like that. I guarantee it. And she came in to that open house, and I was showing the property to a young couple, a young Indian couple, and they loved it. Like, we were just talking about like putting in an offer, and when she came in, and then she came and she stood off to the side just watching it, and I could see a big smile, big grin on her face that we got a live one here. They're talking about making an offer, and I'm explaining all this stuff to them, and then they're asked about something about the schools or what's in the community for shopping, at which time she started to chime in a little bit and explain to them. And they're like, "Okay, great, great, great." And so they already had their own real estate agent. I asked them that, and I was like, "Well, I could put an offer in together for you." And they're like, "Well, we already have our agent." I was like, "Okay, well then, have your agent reach out to me. I'll get him this and that, and we could get the deal going." And they're like, "Okay, great, sounds good." So then they start walking out the door. And then the guy turns around and he walks back in and says, "Oh, by the way, what direction is the front door facing?" She blew up. The owner of the property blew up and got in her face. She's like, "What is it? What direction the front door faces?" Like, she blew up on them. It was the funniest thing, because I've been telling her all the time along, and all these people, they're all doing the same thing. So we eventually found somebody. But for this same property, I had a lot of calls on it where people would call up and ask, "Who lives there?" And I would say, "Well, the owner's currently living there, but she's going to deliver it vacant, And they're like, "No, no, 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 no. Who lives in the area?" And I said, "Well, I can't engage in that conversation. That could be deemed discriminatory, and I could lose my real estate license for that. I could get fined heavily. I can't engage in that conversation. But if you're interested in the property, why don't you come on down? I could set up an appointment, show it to you, and then you could walk the neighborhood, talk to the neighbors, and see if it's a place that's of interest to you." I got so many calls on this particular property that people were asking this question. And then I get another lady that calls up and asks the same exact question. She's asking about the property, and then she goes, "So who lives there?" And I said, "Well, it's going to be delivered vacant. The owner's there." "No, no, no. Who lives in the area?" And I was like, "People. I'm sure they're very nice people." And she's like, "No, no, no, no. I was like, "I know what you're talking about." I said, "I cannot engage in that conversation. It could be deemed discriminatory. I could get fined heavily. I could lose my license. It's illegal for me to talk about things like this. I could talk about the house, but not about who lives in an area." And she's like, "Oh, no, 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 no. You got me all wrong. Me and my husband, we're New Yorkers," with that big New York accent. We're New Yorkers. We want a more diverse area. So who lives there? "Ma'am, it does not matter your reasoning. I cannot engage in that conversation." So, I mean, that's the kind of inquiries I got that would be, I guess, deemed a racist. I guess you could deem racist. That's like the majority of the kind of stuff that I came across, rather than somebody outright saying, "I don't want to live by these people or those people or those people." I've had a couple of those, but not many. Okay. It was mainly that one guy that was straight up with it. And then that one young girl who she was under a lot of stress and didn't know how to express herself. And she didn't even realize that, because I later told her, how everything was coming out of her mouth, how it sounded like so racist, and she didn't even realize it, But yeah, it's not contrary to popular belief. Everything is everything in the real estate business is not a big racist conspiracy where everybody hates each other. You know, reality check. We live in New Jersey. New Jersey's a melting pot. Tell me someone here that does not have a friend that is of just about from every race and every background and every religion or non-religion. I mean, we live in a melting pot here in New Jersey. It's hard to find people who are segregated in segregated communities or anything. So it's not much of an issue. You're probably not going to even have to deal with it. But if you do, don't go blowing up on people. Oh, that's racist, and you scumbag and all that stuff. Have a conversation with people. Tell them, listen, I can't engage in that kind of conversation. I could lose my license. It could be deemed discriminatory, and just let it flow like that. Okay. I know it's tough these days because everybody's on social media and everybody is the keyboard warriors and everybody says everything not to anybody's faces anymore. So it's difficult because people don't know how to have conversations, but you're getting in the business of sales. And sales, you need to be able to communicate with people, look them in the eye, and have a conversation with them. It is a skill, and it is a losing skill that we're losing here in society as social media becomes more and more popular. All the keyboard warriors, we're losing that skill, and you need to get it back if you want to be able to sell anything, okay, in real estate. All right, so once again, page 86, you've already probably got this highlighted. If not, highlight it now. It's towards where is that? 86. Oh, it's just above the last paragraph above advertising. Towards the bottom of the page or the middle of the page, just above advertising. Reverse discrimination regulations are intended to preserve racial balance in given areas. Remember, intent is irrelevant because we could go all the way back up now to the very first paragraph on the top of the same page, and we'll highlight this. The complainant does not have to prove guilty knowledge or specific intent, only the fact that discrimination occurred. So your intent is irrelevant. So it's interesting how here they give the definition for what reverse discrimination is. They say, in recent years, brokers sometimes have been caught in the middle when local governments enact well-meaning quotas. When you're talking about someone's race and you're using the word quota in the same sentence, it ain't good. It gives rise to something called reverse discrimination regulations intended to preserve racial balance in given areas. But once again, your intent is irrelevant. When it comes to discrimination, you only need to prove that a discriminatory act had occurred. So don't fall into that trap that white people can't be discriminated against. Well, actually, that's what reverse discrimination is. People have that thought that, well, white people can't be discriminated against. Well, they can. It even has it in the name, reverse discrimination. Okay. And you see plenty of lawsuits come about because of it, because there were, college entry for the longest time. There was a time that we needed that to have to have more people from different minority backgrounds to get a leg up to be able to get into colleges and things of that nature, other than just their scores and test scores and such. But now, nobody's being held back in colleges or being limited. It's based off of your studies, your motivation. Nobody's being discriminated against from entry into colleges. If what did we used to call it? Did I have it? Oh, it's called affirmative action. Remember that? We had something called affirmative action for the longest time that made these quotas that you had to have so many of the different minority groups in colleges. You had to have so many people in job positions to show that you're not discriminating. But that is long past. And now it's at the point where affirmative action is actually just plain out discrimination. And the Supreme Court has even ruled that that the affirmative action is discrimination in itself and it cannot be used. So our politicians in some states, they've I know it all goes back to politics all the time, but in politics in some states, they're trying to go around this and still have affirmative action, but they call it something else. Okay, so it's now illegal. Okay, so let me see. There was one other highlight I had in here somewhere on this page. Oh, wait. That was this one. Okay, so we had this highlighted and we had this highlighted. And then towards the bottom of the page, it was this to highlight, the reverse discrimination. And then I just show the reference back to what's at the top of the page, that your intent is irrelevant. When it comes to discrimination, somebody just needs to prove that a discriminatory act had occurred. Now let's get into advertising rules. Instead of reading through all this stuff in the book, they do have a guide here. I kind of made up my own guide too. All right, so it's based off of what's here, but I added in a couple of other things, which we probably seem familiar with. So the basic rule is, here's the category, here's what the rule is, what's allowed and what's not allowed in your advertising. I'm not talking about in your conversations with people. I'm talking about in your published advertising, whether it's print media or commercials or radio or what have you. What are you allowed to say in your ads? And what are you not allowed? Well, when it comes to the category of race, color, or national origin, no discriminatory preference or limitation can be expressed, which that's basically the rule all the way down here for all of the categories. What is permitted? You're allowed to say master bedroom and good neighborhood. And how hyper race sensitive do you need to be to consider the term master bedroom a racist term? There are people out there, believe it or not, that they got this major chip on their shoulder that everything immediately falls to race and discrimination. And everything is racist 24/7 for them. These are typically angry people. Okay, how racist do you got to be? How much do you have to be so into this that it's always on your mind, that when you hear the term master bedroom, you think back to slavery days where there was a master and he had the big bedroom in the house? Come on, you know, those days are long gone. So does anybody know actually what a master bedroom is, though? I'd just like to hear the opinions of different people. So
Is it when they have the bathroom in the room?
that's exactly what it is. Yeah. So not every house has a master bedroom. Most people think of a master bedroom as being the largest bedroom in the house. Even if you watch these HGTV programs, Fix This, Flip That, they're like, oh, this must be the master bedroom because it's so big. It's the biggest bedroom of the house. And then the TV show hosts, they're like, yeah, this is the master. Not if it doesn't have a bathroom attached to it, it isn't. Some houses don't have master bedrooms. A master bedroom is one that has a bathroom attached to it. It's got a specific definition for it. Okay, the term good neighborhood, it's permitted. There's nothing racist about that. What you're not allowed to say in your ads are things like white neighborhood or no French, you know, things of that nature. First of all, you should keep all your advertisements should be positive. You shouldn't be using negative terms or terminology in your ads. Okay, when it comes to religion, no discriminatory preference or limitation can be expressed. You are allowed to say in your ads things like chapel on premises, if there is a chapel on the premises. This is like with condos, I guess, where you may have in the building maybe a kitchen that serves food, and you could have chapels on the property itself. We're not talking about things that are in the neighborhood. We're talking about on the property itself or in the building. There's a chapel on premises. You're just describing the features. Kosher meals available. If they have a kitchen there that sells kosher meals, yeah, kosher meals are available. you don't say in the neighborhood, the kosher meals are available because there's a store nearby, because that could be like read off like a dog whistle, like, yes, it's a Jewish community, you know. Um, you're allowed to say things like Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, Happy Kwanzaa, Happy Festivus for the rest of us, all that stuff, those things are allowed. They're greetings, for crying out loud, you know. Don't be so hypersensitive about everything. What's not allowed is saying things in your ads like no Muslims or nice Christian family or walking distance to the synagogue. Even though that may be an important thing for Jewish people and Muslims, particularly with their religions, they need to be within walking distance to their houses of worship for certain holidays and such. They're not allowed to drive; they need to walk or whatever it is. I'm not sure the specifics of the religion there, but I know it's important to them. So that's all we need to know, is that it is important to them. Look, when I started working in West Orange in real estate. So I was just down the hill from Livingston, huge Jewish population. And I went in for a listing with a lady, and she wanted me to specify in my ads and in the listing that it's in walking distance to synagogue. She wanted me to stress that because it's very important. So I said to her, it's very important to who? And she said, to Jewish people. I was like, so why are we targeting Jewish people? And she said, because they're more likely the people that are going to be buying the house. I said, well, although that may be true, that would be illegal advertising for us to target people of a specific religion. That sounds like you're trying to exclude people from other religions, or it could be construed as a dog whistle. Hey, there's a lot of Jews that live in this area, so we're not allowed to say things like that. What we could do is put a more secular term that's not particular directed at one specific religion. We could say within walking distance to houses of worship, and that would be allowed. Okay, when it comes to sex, no preference or limitation can be expressed. You are allowed to say in-law suite, mother-daughter, or female roommate sought. Why is female roommate sought allowed? Isn't that sexual discrimination? No, because it's somebody who's going to be living in the same apartment as you. You may have a young girl that's renting an apartment. She doesn't want the old guy creeper to come in and be like, yeah, I'd like to live with you, So, yeah, you could choose who it is that you're going to have living in your same apartment as you, okay? Sharing the other bedroom. That is allowed, and it's not discrimination. However, you guys know what an in-law suite or mother-daughter is? Both of them describe the same exact thing. They both describe the same thing. It's a single family house that's set up like it's a two-family, like it has a separate apartment. However, it is illegally zoned and permitted as a one-family house. This is good for people, say, like you got here, let me give you an example. I had friends that got married, and they wanted to keep the husband's father. He's getting kind of older and up there. They wanted to keep an eye on him and keep him close to them, but they didn't want him all in their business either when they got their own house now. So they were looking for a house that had an in-law suite or mother-daughter, where basically it was a separate entrance for him where he could come and go as he pleases. He's got his own kitchen, bedroom, living room, all that stuff, bathroom. He's close enough where they could keep an eye on him and check on him, but yet he still has his freedom to come and go as he pleases. That's the perfect type of setup for this type of situation. It would be an in-law suite or mother-daughter. Okay. However, they seem to be hard to find. And when you do find them, they could go for more money because they are in demand. But unfortunately, a lot of real estate agents either don't know the terminology or they simply are not entering it in a database. A lot of the MLSs, that's the database I'm referring to, where we search for homes, agents, there's a checkbox. You could check off the different features that the house has. There is one there called in-law suite or mother-daughter. Okay. I know some people are trying to censor our speech and language. They're trying to get rid of some of these terms that we use as well. Mother-daughter. So what? It's a family. does not discriminate against people without families. In-law suite, what you got to be married? People got chips on their shoulders. They want to bitch and complain about everything. Okay. So our speech is getting limited every day. Trust me on this. I seen a list that was not supposed to be published by one of the MLSs, but they accidentally published it, and I downloaded it really quick, and I seen like a 10-page list of words that they're looking to censor as possible discrimination in the future. It's crazy, some of the things. So our speech. So what's not allowed is you're not allowed to say great house for a man. Why not a great house for a woman? Right? What about wife's dream kitchen? So what, you got to be married? What, only women cook? Right? The term man cave. You guys ever heard that one, right? You guys know what a man cave is, right? You ever hear that term? Man cave? You know, it's usually something probably set up in the basement. That's the guy's way to where he gets away from the family for a while. He's got it set up down there. Maybe got a pool table or a bar set up or a poker table or set up a little movie theater down there with the nice leather chairs and the big screen, so he could be there with his buddies watching the game and getting away from the family for a few. And that's his little domicile, home away from home, right? They call it a man cave. Well, they also have something called a she shed. You guys ever heard of that one? She shed? Check this one out. Often these terms, they're not even made up by us as real estate agents. They're probably made up by these real estate shows on TV. Check this one out. You guys ever see this commercial from State Farm? Here, let me put up the volume here a little bit.
Well, it finally happened, Zachary. Somebody burned down my she shed.
Nobody burned down your she shed, Cheryl.
Well, my she shed's on fire.
Your she shed was struck by lightning.
Zachary, is my she shed covered by State Farm?
Your she shed's covered, Cheryl.
You hear that, Victor? I'm getting a new she shed.
She shed?
Mm-hmm.
That's wonderful news.
Go with the one that's here to help life go right.
All right, so what a she shed. Look at that. She got her chandelier in there. That place is burning down, but she got a chandelier that comes crashing down. Look at that. Look at that place. Look at the setup there. She got electric in there. She got her chandelier. She got it all decked out. That's kind of like her version, the woman's version of a man cave, okay? That's her way where she could get away from the family for a little while, okay? That's all that is. But if you start using these terms in your like you could talk to people, show houses to people and say, wow, this would make a great she shed or man cave or whatever, right? You could have that conversation and it's perfectly fine. However, in your advertisements, I do not suggest that you use that type of wording because somebody who's hypersensitive and hyper offended by everything is going to have a problem with this and file complaints and such, okay? So try to avoid that. Now, when it comes to disability, once again, no discriminatory preference or limitation. You are allowed to say wheelchair ramp, walk to shops, walk-in closet, jogging path, or walking distance to something, and it is not discriminatory against people who can't walk. You're describing a feature. You know, I know when we start censoring the speech, it becomes like walking on eggshells. What can't we say? You know, keep things positive. Don't put in your ads things like no wheelchairs or able-bodied tenants only. I know I had a situation, I was selling a condo at the Waterford in Edison. It's a 3-story condo building, and it has a winding stairwell to get up to the higher units. There's no elevator in the building. There's no way for you to, there's no long stairway where you could put in a ramp for a wheelchair. So I was, in the advertisement, I wrote, 3rd story walk up. And then I actually did get a call from a guy that's wheelchair bound. And he said, well, is there an elevator in the building or is there a way that I could put in a ramps over there? He said, I'm basically bound to the wheelchair. Even though I can stand up, I could climb up maybe 1 or 2 steps, maybe. He said, but I'm pretty much, I need the wheelchair. Is there a elevator or a ramp or a way for me to put a ramp in there? I said, yeah, unfortunately not, because it's a winding stairwell to get up there. So I don't see how you could do it unless you installed like one of those chairs, those creeper chairs to get up there. There's no way to put a ramp in, and there's no elevator. I said, but if that's important to you because you need that, I could see if there's any first floor units that are available here. Are you only looking in this condo complex, or could I look in other areas for you as well? So what's the price range you're looking in? What are the features you need? Da, 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 da. And then I turned him into a client. Keep your ads positive. So I didn't put any negative things like no wheelchairs or able-bodied tenants only. That's negative, first of all. So I found a way to put it in there. I didn't even have to write third story walk up. I could have just said it's a third floor unit, but because I said it was a third story walk up, he called up and he asked about it, and then I had the conversation. Now, when it comes to familial status, no preference or limitation on family size. You're allowed to say things like 2 bedrooms, family room, quiet neighborhood. Although quiet neighborhood and families, I don't get that relation. Families are usually loud, usually noisy, right? Kids screaming, playing. All right. What's not allowed are things like married couples only, no more than 2 children. Like that guy is like, she's going to pop any day now. They already got 2 kids. Retiree's dream home or no young children. Look, even though it could be a senior housing complex, or it could be that your local municipality only allows 2 occupants per bedroom, I would not use any kind of wording like this in your advertisements. Your idea in your advertisements are to try to get clients to call you so you can set up appointments and show them stuff. And if you got a property that's in a municipality that has restrictions on how many occupants per bedroom, you can have that conversation with them when you meet them, but don't put it in ads. Okay. First of all, it comes off negative. Okay? Keep your ads positive. Positive in sales, guys. Positive. Right? It's like when you make phone calls. You guys know how to make business calls to people? You know what you do when you're making a business call to people? I don't care what business it is. So you don't come across like you're tired and you want to go home already and you don't really want to be on the phone with this person. Here's a couple of tips that I learned from oh my God, what school was that? I went to a class, a special training class. Was it Wharton School of Business? They had this class that I signed up for, and it was about sales. I got it for free. It was actually an expensive class, but I got it for free from a mortgage rep, and so I went and I attended the class. And one of the things they say when you're making phone calls, put a mirror, a small mirror up in front of you in your cubicle or by your desk, okay? And look into that mirror before you ever pick up that phone and smile. Seriously, look in the mirror and smile before you get on the phone. Also, look at your posture. Most people, they get on the phone, they dial, they're like this, right? Don't do that, because when you're on the phone like this, your mouth's kind of covered up, your voice inflection isn't really there. If you sit up straight, you see how much louder and clearer my voice is, and it sounds more inviting. And when you look in the mirror now and you smile, then your voice actually changes a little more. You guys can hear slight differences in my tone and in my voice. And that's how it comes across over on the phone to the person you're talking to. So just little tips like this. Look in the mirror, sit up straight, have good posture, look in the mirror, smile, and then get on the phone. That's the way you make phone calls. I'm telling you, because you can make a difference that when you're down like this, you can hear how the voice just changes when I'm just talking. I'm talking the same right now too. I'm not changing my voice. It sounds different, right? And then it's also going to affect you too, slouching over, being humped over. You're going to start to feel like, hey, I don't want to be here. This is like the 50th call I made today. So I already told you, we already had this conversation about the testers with that one girl that I showed the house to. I thought that she was a tester. What is testers? Well, they're undercover volunteers. They act like mystery shoppers. They test real estate licensees. They pretend to be buyers or renters to make sure everybody's being treated equally and the same, and they're not engaging in any discriminatory banter or rhetoric. They are not employed by HUD, because if they were, that would be entrapment. So that would be illegal. They could be the same sex or gender, race, sexual orientation, nationality, religion, or opposite of you. They check to see if everybody's engaging in discriminatory rhetoric or searching activities, because they got nothing better to do with their lives than be on a social justice mission. Okay, I'm not knocking it or anything. I'm just saying that that's all these people do. They're not getting paid for this. They're volunteering to do it, and they're trained by HUD. So let's highlight testers on page 88, and then that's it for this chapter, and we'll do the key terms to review. Testers or checkers are undercover volunteers who want to see whether all customers and clients are being treated the same. Hey, everybody find that? Top of page 88? All right. So that concludes this chapter. Let's go ahead now and do the key terms to review. There's only one of them for this chapter. So, before we get started, go down to letter G, as in George, as in Greg, as in Gary, and where it says court cases covering moderate income housing, write the word low above it. Now they're not even mentioning low income. And this is primarily what this is about, was low income housing, not so much moderate income. How come people always throw in moderate income? Well, because that's the middle class, and that's the largest class of people. So they want to get the largest class of people pissed off. So they talk about the moderate, the middle class.
Which one, Victor?
Letter G. Letter G, where it says court cases covering moderate income housing. Above the word moderate, write low.
Okay, got it.
Because it's mainly targeting low income. And then down to letter I, it says benign discrimination. Cross out the word benign. Benign means it's harmless. There's nothing wrong with it, but all discrimination is wrong. So let's just cross out that word benign. All right, let's do the key terms to review now. Refusal to lend in certain areas, usually the inner city.
Redlining.
Redlining.
There you go, redlining. 9 is A. Inducing panic selling based on prejudice. It's
Blockbusting.
blockbusting. There you go. 2 is B. Federal law protected classes are race and color without exception.
Civil Rights Act of 1866.
Correct. 3 is C. Setting a section of the Federal Civil Rights Act that covers housing. What is the section of the Federal Civil Rights Act that covers housing?
Title 8.
Title 8, correct. 13 is D. Channeling home seekers to or away from certain areas when you're the one making the decision where someone should live.
Steering.
Steering, 11 is E. Statement about discrimination everyone listing property must receive. You give it to property owners at the time you get
Attorney General memorandum.
The Attorney General's memorandum about the New Jersey laws against discrimination and the federal laws. 1 is F. Court case covering low and moderate income housing.
Mount Laurel, 1 and 2.
Yes. 7 is G. Specific group that may not be discriminated against. What do we call them?
Protected class.
They are a protected class. 8 is H. Discrimination intended to correct past wrongs.
Reverse.
Reverse discrimination. 10 is I. Correct. Federal agency enforcing civil rights compliance.
Department of Housing and Urban Development.
Or HUD for short. Correct. 4 is J. Undercover checker who monitors fair housing compliance.
Tester.
Tester. 12 is K. New Jersey law governing discrimination in real estate transaction.
LAD.
The LAD, the law against discrimination. Correct. 6 is L. Federal law setting many protected classes with some exceptions.
Federal Fair Housing
Act.
Of 1968. The Federal Fair Housing Act of 1968. Correct. So 5 is M. All right. And that concludes chapter 4. Doot, doot.